All right, welcome back. I'm not totally sure about these colors, to be honest. So I think these other ones are better. Anyway, we're talking about form layouts here. This is a topic when I introduced forms, I said, oh, by the way, there's this section at the bottom about form grids we're going to come back to once we understand the grid system. So that's what we're doing now. If we go back to forms under components, forms, scroll down or find, where are you? Layout, form grid. This shows us the syntax we can use. Basically, we can just put our forms inside of a column instead of a row. If that's what you want to do, you could do that. And that's what they do here. They're doing just two columns inside of a row, which is going to share that space evenly. So now we have two pieces of the form, two form controls, sharing 50-50. And they stay that way, as you can see here. Now, there's also this variation called form row, which is just, instead of regular row, you can use form row, which slightly tweaks the amount of space between your columns. You can see here there's more space. This is tighter, so you can get larger inputs. So you can use form row instead of just regular old row. And you can make something complex like this, where it's responsive. For example, these two take up 6 units each, except if we look, it's on medium and above. So once we hit the small breakpoint, almost there. There we go. Now they take up their own horizontal row. They're all taking all 12 units. Same thing with, if we look down here one more time, these inputs are sharing 12 units. And let's see, how is it allocated? We have 6, 4, and 2. So this gets 6, this gets 4, and that gets 2. Cool. So we can play around with it. This might be enough for some of you just to see the fact that this works. You might not need to watch the video, but for those of you who do want to see, I have a new file, like always, and I'm going to start by just making a form row. So I'm going to make a form. Then inside of that, I'll do my form-row, which, remember, you could get away with just regular row, but form row is made to work just a little better with these inputs. So I could start with the most basic. If I want to just split up the space 50-50, 2 columns, and we can just duplicate that for now. Actually, you know what? I'm going to wait to put my code in there and then duplicate it. So let's do a label, and let's just say this one says first name. I'm not going to bother connecting them right now, just for your time. And then the second thing will be an input type equals text, and we'll have the placeholder just say first name. And then we can duplicate this. What did I mess up? Missing quote. Okay, so we have this right now. Oh, I need to give it class of form control. Form-control. Okay, so right now it's the only column in the row, so it takes up the entire row. But as soon as I duplicate this and give myself a second row, or a second column, this one will say last name, placeholder is last name, and save. Now they're sharing that space, 50-50. Perfect. And we could go in and do something like middle initial and just make it smaller. So I could duplicate this and say middle initial, I'll just do m.i. And then in here, I'll put middle initial. Or let's just do initial. And if I do it right now, they're going to split up 3. It's going to split evenly. But if I just want the initial, maybe this one should be a lot smaller. So maybe I'll make this one column 2, and then the rest of the space is divided up. And you can see the difference immediately, right? This looks a lot better, although it's still kind of large, to be honest. We might even want to make it column 1. Now the problem we have, I guess, right now is that as we shrink this, this is not a good look on mobile. This tiny little thing where you can't even read the placeholder text. So that's where we just work with the same responsive classes we've been working with. Instead of just the default column that just says take up whatever space is available, we can just say column medium. We could have done small too, but I think this is still kind of cramped right here. So medium is right here, roughly. So that makes sense. So we'll say column medium, column 1 medium, column medium. So right now we have that same layout, but then when we get to our small sizes, they stack. And once we get to, so extra small, stacking, small, stacking, we get to medium. There we go. And if I didn't do form row, I just did row, you can see we just have more space between them. It's better for forms to use form row, but you definitely don't have to. Okay, so of course we could just keep going and add a whole bunch more fields if you wanted to. So we would just add a second row down here if we want something else that goes all the way across. Like what would make sense even? Yeah, address, perfect. If we want an address to go all the way across, we can just do .form row. And then in here, we could say .column if we always want it just always to go across. And in there, I'll just do a label that says address. Once again, I'm skipping the important stuff where we're actually associating the labels. Right now, if I click on my labels, they do nothing. This would be horrible if somebody who was blind was trying to access this website. So not a good habit, but it's also not a good habit for me to take up 20 minutes to teach something in a video. So input text, and let's say this one is address. So let's give it a placeholder, 123 Market Street, and save. And I forgot to give it a couple. I need to do form control, form-control. There we go. So now it always takes up that entire row. Looks fine enough. But the other thing that we haven't even talked about is you can use the grid system. So we're using it within our form, but you can also nest things. So remember, maybe I want this form to be on the right side of the screen. I don't want it to be over on the left. So we could take this exact same form, which starts right here, and come down here. I'm going to do a fluid container this time, container fluid. And in here, I'm going to do I'll just do an H1 that says nested form, grid, frid. There we go. And I'm going to start by just making a row. And then inside of this row, let's just say I have 2 columns to start. So we have 50% on the left, 50% on the right. And in here, I'm just going to paste my form because I have form row in there. And now if you see what happens, our entire form is still the same, except we're now using the regular grid system to make our layout. So it's all the way over on the right side here, 50%. So we're using a fluid container, which goes all the way across. And now you can see it still is contained within that 50% the entire time. So, I mean, we could fix that, or we could center it. That's another thing we could do. We could, a lot of times you make like a sign up form, which I think I'll do as an exercise, where you have it centered in the middle. It's small, or like a login form. There's a lot of things you can do. But I think that's pretty much all I need to show you here is that you can use the exact same classes with inputs. And I guess, this is a better example here because they're using a select as well, which I didn't do. They're using checkboxes, putting a button in there. And another note is you often want to play around with the margin and the padding too, because this is getting a little close. You might want to add some space there just so you don't end up with super cramped forms. Anyway, hopefully by now you're seeing the power of the grid system. It's relatively straightforward. Remember, 12 units. And no matter what content you're putting in there, you have 12 units to work with. And we can continue to nest. All right, so that is the form grid. And yeah, it's good stuff. Next, we'll do an actual exercise.